welcome back to English 103. So I'm going to show you, actually, yeah, that's my dog, sorry about that. I'm actually going to be lecturing on MLA format, the current 8th edition of formatting style of Modern Language Association. So this right here is from Purdue Owl University, and I'm actually going to show you how to access this particular website. And it is incredibly beneficial for you, not just in this class, but in future courses as well. And Purdue Owl is also expert in APA format as well. So I'm just going to go to my internet, and I'm going to type in Purdue Owl, and that's in Purdue Writing Lab. That's what comes up right away. So I'm just going to actually type in Purdue Owl so you would know what it looks like. This is what it looks like in Google. It'll say Purdue Writing Lab. You want to click on that. Takes you right here. And right here are the suggested resources. So it has MLA, APA, and Chicago style formatting. So this is extremely beneficial for you, and not only in this class, but in your other courses as well. So MLA, it has an entire introduction, a workshop, and a formatting and style guide. I'm going to go to the style guide. See the general guidelines, and let's say you need help with the in-text citations. So on the left-hand side under general formatting, it provides all of the necessary things that you would need to create a proper MLA works cited. So let's say you're trying to provide a source that you found online. So right here we have electronic sources. All right. So here's the basic style for citations of electronic sources, such as the author, the article or title of the source, the title of the website will be in italics. So here is the template that all you need to do is fill in for the works cited citation. And here is if you're citing an entire website, but typically you'll be citing like a page that you found in the website or an article in the website. Here it is. So this is what it would look like. You would have the author's last name, comma, first name. Sometimes there's not always an author, so you just skip this portion. And then you type in the title of the page or article in quotation marks, followed by the website in italics, then its URL, and optional when you accessed this website. In this case, it was 6th of July, 2015. And it also shows you how to cite ebooks, an image such as a painting or photograph, an article in a web magazine, and if you find an online scholarly journal, this is how you cite an online scholarly journal. So here's an article from an online database. So just take a look through this Purdue Owl Writing Lab. It's very beneficial for you. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of that. So now we're going to get into the lecture. So MLA stands for Modern Language Association, and it's often associated with the various humanities disciplines. So, and you can also access this MLA style guide through this particular link. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about how you format a document in proper MLA and in-text citations. In a later lecture, I will provide the works cited, but not right now. That's kind of reserved for a different lecture. And for some of you, this will be kind of a refresher for you, or a brief review. Just hang in there. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, just because upon grading some of your essays, I realize we are not all on the same page. So I want to make sure we all get there. All right, so I'm just going to skip that part. So here's the overview. I'm going to show you how to format a paper in MLA style with general guidelines and the first page formatting. And then I'm going to talk about quotations and in-text citations, and of course the list of the works cited in a later lecture. All right, So here are the basic rules for MLA formatting, and just keep in mind that you always need to follow your instructor's guidelines. This is because some instructors might require a little bit different details than another instructor. All right, so make sure you double space everything. That is essential. 12 Times New Roman 12 font. And this is new. I know that maybe when you were in high school or a few years ago, you would put a double space after a period. That is no longer a rule. MLA has since been updated. I know, they update all the time. It's weird. So now it's only one space after a period. All of your margins must be 1 inches on the top, left, right, and bottom. So 1 inches all around. And of course, when you create a new paragraph, the first line of each paragraph must be indented 1/2 inch. Instead of just focusing on this 1/2 inch, just simply press your tab button on your keyboard. So your heading on the left-hand side will be your name, my name, course, and then the due date. This will all be in the upper left-hand corner, and the due date will be the day, month, and then the year. You will center the paper title in the middle, no underlining, no italics, no quotation marks, and no bold typefaced. Use standardized capitalization. That means all essential words will be capitalized. And then in the top right-hand corner, right here, will be your last name and the page in the upper right-hand corner. It should look something like this. Student name, the instructor's name, the course and course number, and then the due date, the day, the month, and then the year. Not October 12th, 2008. That is APA. MLA, we want to see it the 12th of October in 2008. That's how it is pronounced. And then we have your last name and the page in the upper right-hand corner. Notice here there is like a little line that separates the last name from the page. You don't need to worry about that, so just forget that part. And then the center of the page is the title in standard capitalizations. So only the essential words will be capitalized. Unessential words are like a, to, the, is. Those words will not be capitalized. All right. In-text citation. So these are the basics of in-text citations. So in general, the in-text citation will be the author's last name with a page number enclosed in parentheses. So it should look something like this for an in-text citation. Here's the corresponding works cited entry. So this is by William Wordsworth from the book Lyrical Ballads, published in Oxford University Press in 1967. So this is the author's last name. So anytime I provide a quote or a paraphrase from Lyrical Ballads, I need to place Wordsworth and the page I provided that quote or paraphrase in parentheses. For example, Wordsworth stated that romantic poetry was marked by a direct quote, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, end quote, parentheses, then the page, 263, period. So if you put the author's name in the same sentence as the direct quote, you don't need to repeat their last name in the in-text citation. Okay? So that's only if the author's name is in the same sentence as the direct quote or paraphrase. Now, keep in mind that the period goes after the in-text citation. Now, in my grading of papers, I've noticed that some students will attempt to put a period inside of the direct quotes. Do not do that. I know it looks weird, it looks wrong, but it is not. So keep in mind, do not put a period here. It should only be after the in-text citation. Not here, just there. Okay, so let's say you provide a direct quote or paraphrase, but you don't introduce the author. then you need to provide that author's last name and the page in the in-text citation. So romantic poetry is characterized by the direct quote, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, end quote, parentheses, Wordsworth, last name, and then the page 263, end parentheses, period. Notice there's no commas separating the last name of the author and the page. Do not add a comma. Do not put P period for page. It's simply last name of the author and then the numbers. That's it. No comma. All right. So, same thing. This is just a different example. So we have Kenneth Burke from the book Language as Symbolic Action. So I am quoting Kenneth Burke. Humans have been described by Kenneth Burke as, quote, symbol using animals, end quote. So I introduced Kenneth Burke in the same sentence as my direct quote. So Burke does not need to be in my in-text citation, but the page does. However, if I use that same quote but don't introduce the author, humans have been described as, quote, symbol using animals, end quote, then I need to put the last name of the author and the page in the in-text citation. Make sure that period comes at the end of the citation. All right, let's say you find a source, which happens all the time, especially if you find an online source, that does not have an author. Do not make one up, okay? So all you need to do is go to the next item in the works cited list. So if there is no author, here is the corresponding works cited. So if there is no author, like this source citation says, no author, but you have the title of the article or the title of the source in quotation marks. That's what you need to put in your in-text citation. You don't want to put global warming early signs. Okay, you don't want to put that. You want to put the title of the source. So if there is no known author, you put the title of the source instead. So here is my direct quote. We see so many global warming hotspots in North America, likely because this region has, quote, more readily accessible climatic data and more comprehensive programs to monitor and study environmental change, end quote. Citation, impact of global warming article. Notice we need to maintain those quotation marks because this tells your reader this is the title of source or an article. So you must maintain that quotation mark. And then space, then the page 6, and parentheses, period. All right, let's say you are citing two authors, but they happen to have the same last name. And so if all that is required in the in-text citation is the last name of the author and the page, how do I know which author you're referring to? So this is what you would do to differentiate the different authors by the same last name. So here we have author number 1, Miller, and author number 2, Miller. Well, what you need to do is you need to add the first initial of that person's name followed by a period, and then provide the last name and then the page. Remember, this is only if you have you're citing more than one author with the same last name. So this shows that I'm citing from Ryan Miller. Sorry, that's a text message going off. And then I'm citing from Amanda Miller. So although some medical ethicists claim that cloning will lead to designer children, from paraphrase from Ryan Miller on page 12, others note that the advantages for medical research outweigh this consideration. Paraphrase from Amanda Miller, page 46. So that's a good way to differentiate between authors with the same last names. All right, so now we get into when we're citing 3 or more authors. And this happens all the time, especially when it comes to online journals. So, excuse me, my voice is kind of going. 3 or more authors becomes et al. or and all other authors. So that's what et al. Means. It means all other authors. So you still need to introduce the first author mentioned. So when there's let's say a journal article that has 7 authors, that's a lot of authors. The first one mentioned in that author's list is usually considered the primary author, meaning they're the ones that took the lead on this particular article. So you want to list that person first, their last name. So in this case, it's Smith. And then you provide the et al. And all other authors. So you don't have to list all 7 authors. Just the first one, followed by et al. Argues that tougher gun control is not needed in the U.S. End citation 76. You can also put it in all of it in the in-text citation. The authors state, here's my direct quote, tougher gun control in the U.S. erodes Second Amendment rights, end quote. Citation, Smith, et al. Et space al period space 76 is the page, and parentheses, period. No commas, okay, no commas. So that's what happens if you have 3 or more authors. Now, what happens if you have 2 authors? Well, that becomes a little different. Then, in the in-text citation, you will provide the last name of both authors separated by the word and, then the page. So it would be Smith and Miller, or Strong and Ellis. So you want to write it out completely, that word and. Okay? Or if you put it in the same sentence, Strong and Ellis claim in their 2016 study that stricter gun control in the U.S. will significantly prevent accidental shootings, then you would just put page 23 in the in-text citation. But if you put it all in the in-text, make sure you have that and in there for 2 authors. All right, let's say you're citing a work by an author, but this author has written numerous works, and you like, let's say, 3 of those works written by the same author. So how do we cite an author who's written several works, and I am citing 3 different works by that same author? This is how we do it. So let's say I'm introducing the author in the same sentence as my direct quote or paraphrase. Leitner has argued that computers are not useful tools for small children. I'm going to put the title of the source in quotation marks. So title of sources or articles will always be in quotation marks. And I'm going to put that in the in-text citation, page 38. So I know Leitner wrote this article, and I'm citing this particular article. Though he has acknowledged elsewhere that early exposure to computer games does lead to better small motor skill development in a child's 2nd and 3rd year. And I got this paraphrase from Hand-Eye Development article, written by the same Leitner, same author. So we put the name of this article in quotations, followed by the page. So we have Leitner, same author mentioned in the same sentence as my paraphrases from 2 different sources. So let's say I want to add the author in the in-text citation because I did not introduce them in the actual sentence. This is what it would look like. Visual studies, because it is such a new discipline, may be, quote, too easy, end quote. Parentheses, last name of the author, comma. So this is where you finally get to use that infamous comma. And then the title of the article, Visual Studies in quotations, followed by the page 63. So you will have to put the author followed by the comma here. Sorry, I've been doing a lot of these online lectures, so I'm losing my voice because of that. All right, so let's say you're citing the Bible, okay? So Ezekiel saw, and then you provide the direct quote from the Bible. You have to put the edition or the version of the Bible here in italics. So in this case, it would be New Jerusalem Bible, or it could be something like New International Version, and you would put that in italics, followed by the comma. You would abbreviate the title of the book in the Bible, such as Ezekiel, or Matthew would be Matt, period. And then we have Ezekiel, period. Then you have the chapter. So we put chapter 1, colon, then the verses separated by a dash. So verses 5 through 10. So that's how you would do an in-text citation for the Bible. All right, let's say you find a source and it works so great and you love it. And this source, written by John Smith, quotes a scientific study done by Jane Doe. Well, you want to cite that scientific study, but you need to give credit to Jane Doe, because Jane Doe is the one who did that scientific study. John Smith is just citing Jane Doe. So this is what you would do if you find a quote within a source that you like. So, for instance, this is the actual quote within this source. Ravitch argues that high schools are pressured to act as, quote, social service centers, and they don't do that well, end quote. Then you would put in parentheses QTD period, space, the word in, IN, space, then the author of that source where you found Ravitch, then page 259. It would say quoted in Wiseman. So let's go back to that John Smith, Jane Doe example. So John Smith wrote the article, and John Smith is quoting Jane Doe's scientific study. I would say Jane Doe argues that high schools are pressured, blah, blah, blah. And then I would put quoted in Smith, page 259, and parentheses, period. Okay. Now, let's say you are citing multiple pages of the same author, of the same source. This happens again all the time. Sometimes what you're quoting will spill over into the next page. So this is what you do. Although the two lovers in Romeo and Juliet are part of the world of romance, their language of love nevertheless becomes, quote, fully responsive to the tang of actuality, end quote. Author's last name, Zender, page 138, comma, and it also happened on the page 141. So you would put a comma there. However, let's say this direct quote, this portion was on page 138, but this portion was on page 139. You would just simply put 138-139 and parentheses, period. That means you quoted from Zender from 138 to page 139. So this is what it would look like if it's two separate pages, like we see here, separated by 2 pages. But if it's 2 consecutive pages, one right after the other, you would put 138-139. I know, it's a lot of minute details, and that's why I say to refer to Purdue OWL Writing Lab, because it's very difficult to remember all of these idiosyncrasies. So please utilize Purdue OWL for your benefit and to help you to make sure that you're on the right path. All right, so oftentimes you'll run into sources that have no page numbers. That's okay. Do not make up page numbers. So don't add it in there. The basic rule is if there's no page number, don't add the page. Just add the author's last name. Disability activism should work toward, quote, creating a habitable space for all beings, end quote. Last name, Garland. And the in-text citation, followed by a period. And here is that source, Rosemary Garland, Habitable Worlds is the title of the article from the book Critical Disability Studies Symposium from Purdue University, Indiana. So notice there's no pages here, no pages here. It's just Garland, Garland. So don't make up a page, just leave it blank. All right, So, when you are citing a direct quote, this first example says, according to some, dreams express, quote, profound aspects of personality, end quote. Citation, Folks, 184, end citation, comma, though others disagree. What a lot of students do is they'll automatically assume that the in-text citation should go at the end of the sentence. That is incorrect. The in-text citation should immediately follow the direct quote or paraphrase. It does not necessarily have to come at the end of the sentence. It needs to come immediately after the quote or paraphrase. In the second example, this direct quote happens to be towards the end of that sentence. According to Folks' study, dreams may express, direct quote, and then you provide your in-text citation at the end of the sentence. But that's only because the direct quote comes at the end of the sentence. Okay? Let's say you're asking a question. You, the author, the writer, is asking a question to your readers. You just happen to use a source to help you ask that question. Then, this is how you would word it. Is it possible that dreams may express, direct quote, profound aspects of personality, end quote? Folks, 184, and then instead of a period, you would just put a question mark because you are asking the question. So just keep in mind that the citation needs to immediately follow the direct quote or paraphrase, and if you are asking the question, add the question mark where the period should go. So let's say you are adding a block quote, or let's say you are citing a large chunk of a direct quote from a source. The moment it reaches 4 lines, that's when you need to switch it from a just plain direct quote to what we call a block quote. Now, what I mean by 4 lines or more is this. I'm going to click out of the PowerPoint, and I'm going to go to, let's see, your syllabus. I'm going to go to File, New Document. All right. So this is what I mean by 4 lines. That's line 1. That's line 2. This is line 3. And now I'm on line 4. All right. This is my direct quote right here. 4 lines means all the way from the left-hand margin to the right-hand margin. It does not mean 4 sentences. The reason why it is not 4 sentences is because the shortest sentence in this English language is I am. So if you have 4 sentences like I am, that's not going to be a very long direct quote. So that's why MLA says 4 lines, all the way from the left-hand margin to the right-hand margin. So what would we need to do is we need to remove these quotation marks to make it a block quote. We need to highlight it, make sure it's in proper double-spaced, Times New Roman 12 font, okay? And now we need to indent it 1/2 inch. So I'm simply going to go to my little increase indent to 1/2 inch. Then I provide my citation, Smith, 94. Now here is a little difference with a block quote. Remember, normally the period goes after the citation. Normally it would go here. But for a block quote, the period goes before the in-text citation. Why? I don't know. MLA, let's make it consistent. But That's what they decided to do. Probably because the very next line is where you start discussing this block quote, explaining this block quote and how it supports your thesis. Okay, notice I'm now starting what we consider to be what we think might be a new paragraph. Okay. Normally, when you start a new paragraph, you indent the first line. When you provide a block quote like this, the first line of the next paragraph is not indented because this is all considered one paragraph. So don't indent this first line like you would a normal paragraph. Okay. So that is an example of a block quote. So he would introduce the direct quote. Nellie Dean treats Heathcliff poorly and dehumanizes him throughout her narration. You provide the block quote. As you can see, it is quite lengthy. You indent it 1/2 inch. You place the period before the in-text citation. And then you would start your next paragraph explaining how this block quote supports your thesis. All right, so let's say you want to add words in a direct quote. For example, let's say the direct quote says, "He stared at him violently." Well, your reader won't know who he is. So you need to take out he and replace it with Romeo. So you would place brackets where you are adding a new word. So instead of he, you would place brackets, Romeo stared at him violently. So, for example, here, let's say we're adding these words. Jan Harold Brunvin, in an essay on urban legends, states, direct quote, "Some individuals," and I want to add these words here, "some individuals who retell urban legends," so I need to place little brackets around the added words. That's all you need to do. The moment you add words inside a direct quote, you add brackets. Make a point of learning every rumor or tale, end quote, citation. Okay. Let's say you want to take out words because let's say you like a direct quote, but that direct quote goes on for an entire paragraph and you only want a few words from that paragraph. So let's say you take out just a few words. In an essay on urban legends, Jan Harold Brunvin notes that, quote, "Some individuals make a point of learning every recent rumor or tale," and you want to take out just a few words right here. You will create what we call an ellipses, 3 periods. 1, 2, 3 periods. That is an ellipses. It's saying that you took out just maybe 3 or 4 words, and then you continue on with the remaining portion of that direct quote. And in a short time, a lively exchange of details occurs, end quote, citation. Now, let's say you are wanting a direct quote, and you just wanted the first 3 to 5 words of that direct quote. But that direct quote goes on and on and on for 2 more lines. That's taking out more than just 3 or 4 words. That's taking out sentences. So instead of adding an ellipses, period, 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 you would add another period, and that's saying to your reader, hey, I took out more than 3 or 4 words. I took out maybe a few sentences because I only needed a small portion. So just add a period to show the length of what you have omitted. All right, so here's a final video kind of explaining everything I just said on in-text citations. So stay tuned for this video, and this will conclude my voice and my audio for this lecture.
Hey everyone, so this is a video on using MLA style citations in text when you're writing a research paper. I broke this video up so that if you're wanting to know how to do in-text citations, watch this video, and there will be another video on how to do the works cited page. But if anyone who's writing a research paper, and if you're in school, whether it's high school or college, at some point you're going to write a research paper, you're going to have to cite your sources. Different instructors use different methods. Some like APA. In English class, it's probably most likely going to be MLA. That's what I use. It's what I like. It's what I'm familiar with. So I'm going to show you how to do it. And this is pretty confusing for a lot of people, but I'm going to try and give you the basics. Okay, let's talk briefly about plagiarism. What is it? Plagiarism is the intentional or unintentional use of someone else's work or ideas as your own. And it's actually pretty serious. It can result in expulsion or some other type of discipline. I think a lot of the time when people plagiarize, they didn't actually mean to do it. They just forgot to cite their source. They weren't sure how to cite their source. Just don't take the risk. When in doubt, cite your source. If there's any question in your mind about whether you're using someone else's ideas, basically if it didn't come out of your own head, you had to get it from somewhere. Wherever you got that from, cite the source. If you always cite your sources, then you don't have to be nervous about it. Okay, what is the MLA? It's the Modern Language Association. And I want to give you a great resource called Purdue OWL, Purdue University, and OWL stands for Online Writing Lab. And here's the link. And I'm going to show you the most common sources, which are books and online articles. But there's a lot of different types of sources, and they have to be cited differently. So if you're not doing a book or an online article, I recommend you go to this website, and it'll show you exactly how to do it. But for most people, most of the time, they're going to be using books or online articles. So those are the ones I want to go over. If I were to go over all of the different types, we'd be here all day. So let's just go over these two. Okay, so with an in-text citation, you've got the author's name, and it must appear either in the sentence or in the parentheses at the end. And we're going to look at examples of this. And the page number will always be in the parentheses. It will never be in the sentence. So let's look at, I'm going to show you 4 quotations, and they're all the same, but they're all a little bit different. So in this case, I just pulled this out of a paper I was writing. I'm introducing the author at the beginning, right? So best will suggest that. Then I've got a comma, a lot of people forget that, and then I've got my quotation. At the end of the quotation, I've got the page number. And then notice that the period goes at the very end of the parentheses. A lot of people want to put it inside the quotation marks because it looks more correct, and I understand because I kind of have that impulse also, but it's counterintuitive, but it actually has to go all the way at the end. So try and think of it like the page number is part of your sentence. Maybe that will help you, but the period always goes at the end. Here's another example. It's basically the same thing, except for style purposes, maybe I didn't want to actually introduce the author at the beginning of the quotation. Depending on how the wording is in the paragraph you're using, maybe you want to just run straight into the quotation. You don't want to be introducing the author at the beginning all the time, because that could get a little bit clunky. And I recommend that you mix up the way you do this, as I'm doing here. But I still have the author's name, but in this case, because I didn't introduce it at the beginning, it goes in the parentheses at the end. Still have the page number, and the period still goes outside the quotation marks at the very end. Now, if you don't want to use a direct quotation, but you're still conveying some kind of information that you found, that's basically a paraphrase. So if the information wasn't your own, you didn't know it yourself, you need to cite it, but it's not really a quotation. It's something that you read and that you're putting it into your own words. But I still have the author's name, and I still have the page number, and notice the period is still going at the end. But what's missing, as I'm sure you've noticed, is there's no quotation marks, because I'm not actually using the exact words that Bestool used. I'm using my own. And here's another example of that. It's the same thing, except I didn't want to introduce the author's name at the beginning. I wanted it at the end, so it's going to go in the parentheses. So that seems maybe a little bit confusing, but it's really just the same sentence 4 different ways. And as I said before, I really recommend that you mix up the way you do this. Don't always use the author at the very beginning, or don't always use the author in the parentheses. Try and mix it up, because otherwise it can really start to sound really redundant. So let's talk about citing the sources. Here's the exception, and this is basically the only exception. If a phrase is common or universally known, such as a proverb, then no citation is needed, though quotation marks are still required. So, for example, Aristotle advised like activities produce like dispositions. If you're using that in your paper, you don't actually have to cite where you found it, because it's a proverb or a common phrase. but it is someone else's words, so you're going to use the quotation marks. Again, when in doubt, if you did look it up, just cite the source. Because you can get into this game where you're saying to yourself, well, it's pretty commonly known, maybe I don't really need to cite it. Don't play that game, because you can end up in a lot of trouble. It's not worth it. It's too stressful. If you pulled it from something, just cite the source. If you already knew it in your own head and it just came to you, but you know it was someone else, use the quotation marks, but don't cite the source. So as I said, when in doubt, just cite the source. Okay, online source material. This is becoming more and more common. About 10 years ago, it wasn't really accepted in academic papers, but now it is more so. So basically, if you know the author, use it. If not, use the name or partial name of the website as the author. As I showed you in the previous examples, just use the name or partial name of the website in place of the author. You don't need to give paragraph numbers or page numbers if it's online. There probably aren't any. Don't give the full URL in the text. It's sufficient to use, for example, CNN.com. You don't need to put http://. Now, here's the thing. MLA in 2009 actually changed the rules on this. You don't have to give the URLs anymore, but a lot of instructors are probably used to it, and they're probably going to want it anyway. The thing about MLA is they change a lot, so check with your instructor. Technically, the rules say you don't have to do that anymore, but so many people have done it for so long that you might have some explaining to do if you don't do it. So just check with your instructor on that. Legitimate online sources, scholarly articles, will be easy to reference because the author will be clearly indicated. If you're having trouble finding the source info, it's probably not a good source to be using for academics. So if you've got some kind of article that you found online and you can't really figure out who the author is, probably don't use it then. Anything that's a legitimate scholarly source, it's going to be very clear who the author is because they want credit for their work. So if you're having trouble finding it, I would say just don't use it. Okay, let's talk about 2 style points. This is for the in-text citations. If the quotation is 4 lines of prose or less, or 3 if it's verse, use the format that I just showed you, where you have the quotation, you have the parentheses, and you have the page number. If it's longer, you need to indent. You remove the quotation marks and you place the punctuation before the parenthetical citation. So as you see here, for example, if in your paper you had the sentence, in this sense it is the sacrifice, not the epiphany, that defines the tragic, that blue line would basically be the margin of your paper, and that's the margin that's set by your word processor. What you're going to have to do is you take that chunk of a quotation that you want to use, and you have to indent the whole thing so that it lines up, and just use your tab key. And notice the quotation marks are gone, and that's because by indenting it, I'm indicating that it is a quotation. And you've still got the period, but notice now it's moved. Now it's on the other side of the parentheses. So this is where it gets a little hairy. If it's just one line, it's going to be quotation marks, and the period's going to go on the outside of the parentheses. If it's a block quote like this, it's called block quoting. It's going to be indented, which is going to indicate that it is a quote, so you don't need quotation marks, and the period goes on the other side. This, like I said, this stuff is confusing. Just use the website I showed you, Purdue OWL. That will help you if you forget. But the more you do this, it almost becomes second nature, and you don't really have to think about it that much. Okay, if you add a word or words in a quotation, you should put brackets around the words to indicate that they're not part of the original text. So if you are introducing something into the quotation that maybe was clear in the text, but because you've taken a chunk out of the text, you lifted it, and you're putting it in your paper, it's maybe not clear what the author was referring to, or you want to just add some kind of clarification of your own, use brackets. So the quotation actually from the book was and I can't remember, it was, but it wasn't specifically Gower, Chaucer, and Langland. Bestill referred to somebody, and then he said, probably medieval authors. Hilton is a practitioner of the vernacular. Well, I didn't feel like that was clear enough, but I knew what he was talking about because I'd read the article. So I introduced more specific information. So you always want to put it in brackets, but otherwise the rules don't change about where the periods go and where the quotations go. That's basics. That's the basics. Like I said, there's...
All right, thank you. That was a great lecture, and let me know if you have any questions.
different ways to do it. Check out that website.
And hopefully I can get out of here. There we go.